sources of food for survival. So just to show you some nice pictures of prints, this is how they look. And I have a little video that tells
stations. The Antarctic krill can be found in great abundance all around the Antarctic ice cap, in the purest waters on Earth. And the estimated total
Hello, Amitava, shall I close this recording? It disturbs something.
No, this was part of the video.
Okay.
Okay. So, a little bit of history about the continent. But Sushanta, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Little bit of history about the continent. It is said that many million years ago, about 225 million years ago, all the continents were joined together in a supercontinent called the Gondwana land. And about 225 million years ago, they started breaking up for some reason and started floating away. And then as time progressed, these continents, little pieces, broke up and then, started floating to their present position, and finally they are where they are. So you can recognize, actually, this, you can join it together like the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. The interesting thing is that the Indian peninsular region, which was actually joined here, was actually joined to the eastern coast of Africa, a part of Antarctica, and a little bit of Australia. So, and then this little triangular piece, the peninsular India, has come and hit the Eurasian plate, and that's how the Himalayan mountains have come up. And it's still banging against the Eurasian plate. That's why the Himalayan mountains are still going higher up. So these things give us some clue as to our geological explorations. So whatever minerals that we found in the western coast of India should be similar to what we can find in the Queen Maud Land area of Antarctica. So these are interesting things from the geological point of view. A little bit of history. Many years ago, about 250 years ago, nobody had even thought about Antarctica. Nobody had been there. So, but the earliest ones were Greeks who knew about the Arctic. So they knew there had to be an anti-Arctic. So the term Antarctic was coined by the Greeks, Antarctos, and I'll not go into the history of that. But the first time anybody came close to Antarctica was about 250 years ago, when Captain James Cook went with a ship and circumnavigated Antarctica. He didn't land. He didn't see any land at all. The weather was so bad, it was foggy, stormy. He just went all around and came back. And then 50 years later, these gentlemen, Palmer, Smith, Bellinghausen, etc., they sighted the first land about 200 years ago. And then a little later than that, some people actually went and landed there. The beginning of the 20th century was a big race to reach the South Pole. And these are legendary figures, Robert Scott and Roald Amundsen, who actually raced with each other to be the first. And Amundsen beat Scott in reaching the South Pole. And then the first transantarctic flight. And finally, in 1957-58, the International Physical Year triggered scientific cooperation at the international level. And then that is when it was recognized that this was the continent scientific investigations only. And then came the Antarctic Treaty, and finally in 1981, which was the first time the scientific expeditions to Antarctica began. Who owns Antarctica? Nobody owns Antarctica, although 7 countries think they do. These are the 7 countries: United Kingdom, Argentina, Chile, Norway, New Zealand, France, and Australia. Each one claims a little bit of pie of this continent. Nobody disputes that claim, nobody recognizes that claim too. But now we have an international Antarctic treaty, which was first signed in December 1959 by a group of 12 countries, which set aside Antarctica as a scientific preserve, established the freedom of scientific investigation, and banned military activities on this continent. As of today, as of 2016, and in fact, between then and now, nothing has changed. There are about 52 countries, including India, who are permanent signatories to the Antarctic Treaty, which stipulates, this is important, the following rules. The area is to be used for peaceful purposes only, no military activity is allowed, freedom of scientific investigation and cooperation, free exchange of information and personnel in cooperation with the United Nations. The treaty does not recognize, dispute, or establish territorial sovereignty claims. The treaty prohibits nuclear explosions or disposal of radioactive waste. So that's the nutshell of Antarctic Treaty that governs the Antarctic continent. So now the story of Indian expeditions to Antarctica. The first time India sent an expedition to Antarctica was in 1981-82. This is the 21-member team that went to the Antarctica, led by Dr. Syed Zahur Qasim, who is a renowned oceanographer. And I don't know in this if you can recognize me without the beard, that's me. I was very young. I was one of the youngest members of the team at that time. I did not have beard. I grew beard after I reached there, and I've had it ever since because I kind of liked it. So some of us in this expedition team, barring the Fojis, didn't have any experience with, we in India live in a warm climate, and we are not exposed to oceans or seas or sailings, etc. So we had to be given training. So some of us were sent to Gulmarg, the high altitude warfare school. So we were sent to Kargil, and these are areas where no civilian can go today. So we had been trained in Machar Glacier, very close to Kargil, and we were also taken on a Indian Navy frigate in the Bay of Bengal and given a 1-week training. So all that was done in absolute secret because this was a secret mission operation that's in Gangotri. So we all felt like James Bond in a James Bond movie, So the first time the news got leaked was when we were halfway on way to the Antarctic. So this was the ship that we used for going to the Antarctic in the first. This is a small icebreaker ship, a Norwegian ship called Polar Circle. This is a picture taken by me, not a very nice picture, but I'll probably say. And this is the route that we took in the first expedition. We started from Goa, National Institute of Oceanography, and we went through the Arabian Sea. We stopped at the island of Mauritius for refueling and reprovisioning, and then we set down to our final destination. In the first expedition, we of course didn't know where we were going to go, so we explored all the areas somewhere here. Originally, I believe we wanted to land somewhere down here, but we could not. I'll show you pictures that will explain why it was not possible to land where we wanted. So eventually we landed where we could. So anyway, the first few days of the expeditions are very nice. You go through the Arabian Sea, the calm and quiet waters near the equator, the phenomenon known as doldrum. You don't have very strong winds. You have day after day, very nice sunrise and sunset, and you get beautiful pictures. It kind of gets boring after a little while. But if you watch this globe, around the southern latitudes, between 40 and 50 degrees south, there is hardly any landmass. It's an open ocean. And whenever you have open oceans all the way surrounding the globe, you have extremely severe weathers, you have cyclone systems. So this latitude belt of 40 to 50 degrees south is called the roaring 40s. So we had our ship had to go through the roaring 40s. And when we do that, we encounter extremely turbulent seas. I mean, I can't show you pictures of that because we are not in a position to take photographs because the ship is tossing about. And of course, I picked up a video from the internet that kind of tells you how it feels to be in such turbulent waters in the middle of ocean. So here it is. So imagine, this kind of a phenomenon that goes on for a couple of days. So it's not for a short time. So and these waves are typically about the height of a three-story building. They're about 100 feet or 200 feet tall waves blasting you from all directions, and it's frightening to say the least. But then, and particularly when you realize that the nearest landmass from your ship is something like a few thousand kilometers away. So one of my friends at that time asked me, "Hey, do you know swimming?" I said, "No, I don't." He said, I said, "I don't need to learn swimming because if I fall down in this water, I'll probably die of heart attack before I even attempt to swim." So anyway, that's roaring 40s for you. So when we have roaring 40s, all the things, all our equipment in the laboratory, all other things, etc., have to be tied down very, very well. Otherwise, everything is a mess. And we get what is known as seasickness. There are many people, everyone gets seasick, including the toughest of the sailors, but it's only the extent. Some people get more seasick. It's a terrible feeling because you get nausea, you cannot eat anything at all. It's terrible, and when that goes on for 2 days at a stretch, it's unbelievable. Anyway, but all that, nothing is permanent. All that passes, and the seas become calm as you go further down south. And around 50 degrees south or so, at a far off distance, we sight our first iceberg. So these are so beautiful. Cold, the temperatures become colder, and far off you see icebergs. And then you see what are known as wandering albatrosses, those majestic birds which just float all around you, follow the ship for miles together. These birds are really huge. Their wingspan across is an adult albatross has a wingspan which can be as large as about 12 feet. That's the largest living bird on Earth. So these albatrosses are beautiful. Here I have a video for you which I picked up from the internet, just showing you how the albatrosses follow us for miles together, for day after day, during the 50s. So then, I often used to wonder, we are so far away from land, why don't these guys have to go back to their nests, or don't they have to go and sleep somewhere? Actually, it turns out that they don't. And adult albatross spends most of its lifetime just floating around in the water and occasionally resting on the surface of the ocean, and then eating its food from the ocean. They follow the ship because the ship's propellers churn up the biomass, and that's source of food for them. So they only go back to land once in a while, which is somewhere in New Zealand or Australia, to breed, and then they come back and spend their rest of their lifetime floating around. So here is the video on So then as we go further down south, gradually the frozen sea starts to appear. These are chunks of ice floating on the sea called Antarctic ice packs. now we are in the southern ocean. So these things initially are not so dense, but gradually as we move down south, they become denser. So I picked up another video that shows you that how it looks as the ship moves through the ice pack. We are wading gently through the Antarctic ice pack, and right now it's not so dense, but it gradually gets denser as we move down south. But when it gets very dense, then the ship cannot move any further. So we have to bring out, at this point, we have to bring out our helicopters from the, we carry a number of helicopters, and we fly the smaller helicopters to go and do recce to find out if there are open channels or if it gets really dense or so. So that's how we find out which are the places where we can attempt to land and which are the ones which are not possible at all. So another video that shows you the ship is really struggling to go through the ice pack. It gets really bad. It gets really bad because, it's kind of dangerous because although they seem like small pieces, but underneath, remember, there are about 9/10 of them are under the water. And so they can be really sharp jagged edges, which can be a threat to the icebreaker ships too. So one has to be very, very careful here. The ship cannot move very fast at this point. But finally, we do encounter clear water areas. They're called polynia of iceberg. And there, the sea ice is all gone thanks to some favorable sea currents. And you have all around you nice big icebergs. So this is a very fascinating sight. These are the classical Antarctic flat-topped icebergs. You don't get such icebergs in the Arctic or anywhere else. These are chunks of sea ice shelves that have broken away from the continent and they are floating in the sea. They come as far north as about 50 degrees south, but then by then they have kind of disfigured and molten mostly. But these can be very large in size also. I mean, some of them can be as large as 2 kilometers across. And then this is a picture taken by me. And see, this height is easily about 200 feet tall. It was higher than our ship. And remember, about 8/9 of it is under the water. I mean, only one-ninth floats above the surface of water, 8/9 is underneath. And of course, we sight our first penguins, which are frolicking around in good weather, sunny weather, on top of some of these icebergs. They are so beautiful to look. And this is another video that I've picked up from the internet. Not my video, but what we saw very close to this. Our ship is gently wading through a polynia of iceberg. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. The camera cannot capture this. And we occasionally also catch other fauna, such as killer whales. They're really pretty to look at. They have this nice pointed fin, and underneath they're white. So we have in fact seen the humpback whales also in the Indian Ocean, but it's not possible to take pictures of them. It's very hard because they're here now, and instant later they surface somewhere else, and so on. And finally, we land in Antarctica on 9th of June 1982. This is a historic day, and this is our ship Polar Circle making our first landing. And we are close to the. This is still frozen sea. It is not the continent. But there is a big saying that there's a phrase in English which is called beginner's luck. And I've always believed that we have been extremely lucky right in the beginning of our expedition because we got perfect weather. It is not always like this. So we had absolute beginner's luck. So we landed on the first day, 9th of January, and some of us were walking around on the seashell. And this is the classical Indian picture which has been shown in media and so on. This is the team of first Indian Antarctic expedition on 9th of January 1982. I don't know if you can recognize me in this picture. That's Dr. Kasing, our leader, and that's me without the beard still. So, and then as we go into the ice shelf, the penguins greet us, and we are trying to be very friendly with the penguins. We are trying to offer them milk and other things, but these guys are very particular about what they eat or drink. They don't take anything from us. They eat only quills. And of course, there are two kinds of penguins that we see in Greenland land and most of Antarctica, in fact. They are Adelie penguins. Adelie penguins are tall. They're about 2 or 2.5 feet tall, but very elegant looking. And of course, there are emperor penguins, which are much taller. They're about meter or meter and a half tall and majestic looking, just like penguins. So I have a short video picked up again from internet that I'm showing you. This is how the penguins generally move all around us. They're not afraid of humans at all because they've hardly had, and the emperor walks majestically. These birds cannot fly, but they are very good swimmers. And they, once in a while, they move very fast when they slide on their tummies. This is called tobogganing. This is so cute. So we also see Weddell seals around us. I didn't have a video of Weddell seals, but these are also very friendly creatures that are near the sea coast. So then we start setting up our base camp in the first expedition. The first base camp that we set up were in medium Arctic tents of the Indian Army. And we set up a few of these tents, and one of these was the cooking tent, and there were laboratories and our living tents and so on and so forth. So and then in the second expedition, again we had a camp in medium Arctic tents, and we used these 4 scooters to move around. We had some other bigger vehicles also, which I'm not showing here. So, like I said, you know, we have been extremely lucky in the first expedition. We spent 10 days living in this base camp, and we had absolutely perfect weather. And in the second expedition, we also constructed a kind of a hut or an initial attempt at making a permanent station. This was a hut which was designed and given to us by, prefabricated and given to us by the Central Building Research Institute in Roorkee, and we erected it there. And in the and that's our base camp all around, and that's me. So in the second expedition, 82-83, we were not quite as lucky. Towards the end of the expedition, we actually had a terrible blizzard, which lasted more than 48 hours. And some of us got trapped in the blizzard. Others managed to get back to the ship. But all the base camp just went away. You know, they were completely gone, blown into smithereens by the blizzard. And we somehow survived inside this little red and white building. And we were rescued after 2.5 days or so. And then we, of course, came back to India. So, like I said, the first expedition, we were extremely lucky, that beginner's luck. But then in the third expedition onwards, we set out to make a permanent station called the Dakshin Gangotri. So the first station which we set up, the Dakshin Gangotri station, was not built in India. It was a complete contract given to a British company called, I can't remember the name. So all the parts were prefabricated in semi-knockdown condition, and they were assembled in Antarctica. So, but before I go on to that, part of the story. I just want to show you one little picture. This is me standing at midnight. In Antarctica in summer, where we are, the sun never sets in summer. This is the position of the sun at midnight. It just comes like this, goes to the lowest level, and then goes up and back on again. At midday, it's slightly higher. That's all. It just goes up round and round. So it's so fascinating and it's so disorienting. So then the construction of Dakshin Gangotri begins. So we start setting up a permanent station on the ice shelf. This is not on land. This is on the ice shelf in the continent. And gradually the building starts coming up. This was done in the third expedition where I was not a member. And then finally the first permanent Indian station, Dakshin Gangotri, came up in March 1983. You see, this is a nice two-story building. You can see that here in this picture. It has two wings, A and B, joined by a middle portion. So, and you enter the station from the ground floor, and you can see the hatch, and there's the satellite communication terminal, which is perched on the top. So this is how we left this station in March of 1983, and the first wintering station, first wintering team was left behind in March 83. So that was the first Indian wintering in Antarctica. But then I come back a few years later. I came back as the leader of the 8th expedition. I visited Dakshin Gangotri in 1988, just 4 years later, and this is what I find. The entire station has gone under the ice. You know, you can recognize this. You can recognize this from the hatches. You see the hatch here? That's the hatch, you know. So we are actually standing. So I took a group photograph with the team that was wintering the year before in winter. So that's me. I don't know if you can recognize. And that's the wintering team that I'm taking a group photograph. And we are standing on top of the Dakshin Gangotri station. And when we clean up the ice, this is how it looks. See, this would happen to any station that is constructed on the ice shelf. You keep a hot object on ice, it gradually starts to sink. And when it has completely sunk, it sinks no further. So it just gets completely submerged under ice. But inside the station, everything is functioning perfectly. There's no damage to the station. It's just that the whole structure sinks under the ice. Inside, there's a laboratory inside Dakshin Gangotri, which is functional. So in 1988-89, when we went in the 8th expedition, hey, maybe you can put your phone in the silent mode.
Yes, done it. Sorry.
Okay. So, I'm sorry, I lost the flow. So when we visited in 1988, the station was fully functional, you know, performing all the tasks that were mandated to it. But however, it was getting really dangerous because should something happen, should there be an accident, it would be extremely difficult to evacuate people, men and material from this. So with a heavy heart, we have to abandon this station in 1988-89. In later years, it has been kept as only a storage depot. And then we started looking for a more permanent place where to set up a second Indian station called Maitri. Now, Maitri being a bigger station, we had to take a larger ship. This is the 8th expedition ship, which is really huge. You know, the length of this ship is about 186 meters, the size of 2 football fields placed end on end. These are the places where we all live, the bridge from where the ship is driven. And in between, this is the area which has all the helicopters. And here, this area is all full of construction material and our food and provision, oil, etc. for the next full year for the Maitri station. So we surveyed the rock outcrop. Remember, I said about 98% of the Antarctica is covered with ice, and this is one of those 2% areas which still managed to remain uncovered with ice, thanks to some special winds that blow the ice away as soon as it falls. So this is one such rock outcrop that we surveyed and chose for our Maitri station. And we start setting up the construction, setting up the station on stilts in 1987-88. And all the material for the construction had to be transported from the ship to the construction site, which was about 80 kilometers further down south by helicopters. So that was a humongous task, and everyone had to pitch in, the scientists, the army people, everyone had to pitch in. It was really hard work for all of us. So then, and the construction progresses very briskly because we have to finish it within about 3 months. That's the duration of the expedition. Otherwise, it gets cold. Otherwise, the next expedition takes up the work. So finally, the second permanent Indian station, Maitri, comes up in March 1989 in the 8th expedition. So I'm really proud of this station, not just because this was constructed when I was the leader of this expedition, but primarily because almost everything about this station was made in India. You know, this entire station, all these things that you see here, they are prefabricated pieces that made up the walls, the floor, and the roof, and everything. So that was made, the entire building was designed and fabricated by the DRDO, the R&D engineers in Dighe in Pune, and we had carried all these prefabricated portions to assemble in Antarctica. Everything other than the satellite communication terminal and one biodigester here, these were imported. Other than that, everything else was made in India. The generators were Kirloskar generators, the washing machine was Sumit washing machine, and the pumps were Tullu water pumps, and everything was made in India. So I'm really proud of this station. And remember, this was made in March 1989, and it still functions perfectly. I have some more photographs later on to show you what it looks like today. But this is the 32nd year of its operation, and it still proudly operates and maintains a summer party and a winter party and so on. So really Pakka construction made in India. So this is another view of the Maitri station. This is the landmass, and that's permanent Antarctic ice covering the. And we have a lake from a freshwater lake from where we take our water supply. There's a submersible water pump here, and the lake freezes in winter, but still underneath at deep down, there is still water for us to drink. And this is the last day of my stay in Antarctica. This is the one final photograph that I took with my team that I was going to leave behind for winter. You can recognize me by the different dress that I was wearing. So I was leaving behind a wintering team led by Colonel Jagannathan, who were going to winter in Antarctic in between the winter of 1983 and 84. So, and this one final photograph of Maitri station that I took from the helicopter, I said, hey, just turn around, take me around the station. I want to capture one final remembrance of this station. So this station, as you see, has a main wing where people live and work. All the laboratories and people housing quarters are here. And this is the kitchen and the washing area. And this wing houses all the generators. Electricity has to be generated 24 hours for heating and lighting and everything else. So all the generators are housed in this block. And you see the special extra appendage here. This is our toilet. Now, toilet is of great significance because it's so cold in Antarctica that nothing degrades. So the human waste is one such thing that we have to be really careful about because it will not degrade. So what will happen is if you don't dispose it of properly, then it may percolate down to the lake where you draw your water from. Then it's a catastrophe. So what we construct is a toilet where we actually burn all our human waste. This is incinerator toilet, and this is constructed separately from the main station with a little connection here. So just in case of a fire, you can cut it off. And the wind direction is generally from east to west. So this is the wind direction. So that's why it's constructed here. So this is a more recent picture of the Maitri station, which one of my younger friends gave me. So the station still looks the way we left it 30 years ago. They have constructed an additional unit here. This is a greenhouse chamber where they grow vegetables. This is the sunward facing portion, and they apparently grow in summer some vegetables like cucumbers and tomatoes and so on, very limited quantity, just for fun. And you see also that far away, they have lots of barrels. This is the entire year's provision for oil for the generators and the running the vehicles and everything. So all this oil depot has to be far away from the main station just to prevent any accident. So another nice picture of the Maitri station before. So I show a few pictures of the scientific activities. I won't go into details. We carried out some air sampling studies in Antarctica. This is my colleague Pravard Gupta doing some air sampling monitoring of carbon, of methane and carbon monoxide and particulate matter in Antarctica in 1988-89. And that kind of established the baseline for our present day measurements. And we were also doing some radio communication studies with geologists, friends of ours from National Geophysical Research Institute and Geological Survey of India, etc. They flew out further down south to Wolthorpe mountain areas and did some very meaningful, very fruitful geological studies. They actually set up camps and surveyed these areas very, very well for their mineral resources and so on. And then finally, much later, in March 2012, a third Indian Antarctic station, Bharti, has come up. This is, of course, a very sleek station. This is, again, not made in India. This was a complete contract given to a German company that not only designed and built the station, they actually went and constructed it on site and finally handed it over to us. This is our Bharti station. Just to show you where Bharti is, this is where second Indian station Maitri is. Dakshin Gangotri was close by, only 80 kilometers away. And Bharti is on the eastern side of Antarctica, and Larsemann Hills. And this is where Bharti is. And another nice picture of the third Indian station, Bharti, in 2006. These two stations, Maitri and Bharti, are still being very productive in scientific work, scientific studies. Okay, now before I come to the last part of my talk, I just want to tell you that so far I've been showing you nice pictures of penguins and seals and stations and our base camp and so on. Very nice, colorful pictures. But remember, all these pictures are possible it's possible for us to take such pictures only when we have good weather and favorable conditions. And most of the time in Antarctica, the conditions are not very nice and favorable. So it's only those little slots that we got that we took these pictures to show to the world how nice and beautiful, fascinating it is. And there are times when it's really, really nasty. For example, like I said, the blizzard. I unfortunately don't have a picture. Those days we didn't have fancy cameras and so on. Digital photography did not exist. Uh, so I picked up another lizard picture from the internet. So here it is. So this is very similar to the kind of lizard that you just so it's a complete whiteout. You can't see, 10 feet away. It's complete whiteout. These guys want to go from one building to another. So they have a rope. They have to hold on to the rope, and that guides them to the next building. This is how terrible it is. So the other terrible thing about Antarctica is fire hazard. You feel very funny that with all the ice around, all around you is ice, but in case there is fire, there's nothing you can do to douse the fire because there is no water. So we in fact had a fire accident when we were constructing the Maitri station. We had an incinerator toilet which was assembled close by for our use, and that went into flames. And we just had to watch helplessly while it just completely was razed to the ground because there was no water to douse the fire. So fire is a real hazard in Antarctica, and we have to be extremely careful about fire hazards. There are also other accidents. For example, in one of our expeditions, in the ninth expedition, we had unfortunately one of the very few casualties that we have had in the last 30 or 32 years of Antarctica. We had a few geologists who were camping in a station in Wolfart Mountains, and because it was very cold in the night, they went inside their tents and also got the generator inside because they were thinking, uh, it's such an irritation having to wake up in the night, go out of the tent and refuel the generator, etc. So they got the generator inside, but that's a terrible mistake because the generator produces carbon monoxide. So they just died in their sleeping bags out of carbon monoxide poisoning. So these are some of the hazards in Antarctica. Then, of course, we've had other accidents like a helicopter accident in the third expedition. Fortunately, nobody died. But see this water around in Antarctica. This is not 0 degrees. The water being very salty, it does not freeze even at minus 1.8 or so. The water temperature here is about minus 1.8. So if somebody falls in this water, it takes you about a few minutes before you die. So it's really very dangerous. It's very risky. So no amount of your knowing swimming or not swimming will help. So finally, why is science in Antarctica interesting? It is arguably the most untouched and undisturbed region on the planet, being remote, isolated, and frozen all year round. Science in Antarctica offers many advantages over anywhere else on Earth. For example, it has the cleanest air in the world, allowing air quality monitoring with a reliable baseline. It is the darkest place on Earth, an ideal setting for astronomical research. It also allows you to study the bottom of the food chain, the krills, allowing scientists to better understand environmental impacts on humans. Finally, Antarctica has no borders, allowing research findings to be freely available to anyone. Also, many projects that are carried out in Antarctica are internationally coordinated and supported without any home turf issues. And what are Indian scientists studying in Antarctica? I mean, naturally, I'll not be able to go into great details, because of shortage of time. But I'll just tell you in bullet points what are the broad areas that Indians are studying in Antarctica. Clearly, we are studying meteorology and global climate change. Meteorology because it is believed that the Antarctic weather affects our monsoon. We are studying the connection between the Indian monsoon and the Antarctic weather, and certainly the global climate change. We are studying, of course, geology because of strategic reasons, and glaciology. Geology because, like I said, today, thanks to this international understanding of the Antarctic Treaty, although there are a lot of, we are certain that there is a lot of oil and natural gas and mineral resources in the Antarctic, it is not possible to exploit it for two reasons. Firstly, the technology does not allow us to do it because everything is covered with a thick layer of ice and it's so remote. And secondly, the Antarctic Treaty prohibits us from doing any exploitation of any resource in Antarctica. But who knows, another 50 years later, situation may change. So we have to study the geology of Antarctica very well. Earth sciences, astronomy and astrophysics, aeronomy, that's study of the upper atmosphere and radio communications, where I was involved, radio communications, marine biology, and human biology under stress. So these are some of the important things that our defense, DPAS, Defense Institute of Physiology and Allied Sciences, they carry out some of these experiments, which are very relevant to the people that are stationed in Siachen Glacier and such border areas. So, well, that's about all. But some of my very eminent friends requested me to talk about what are the results on ozone holes and stuff. I think if you allow me a few more minutes, I can just very qualitatively, very briefly tell you about ozone hole in Antarctica. Because in the beginning of the 21st century, in the early 2000s, that the springtime value of the total ozone over Antarctica appeared to dip suddenly. And this is the phenomenon of the Antarctic springtime, September, October, November, etc. The Antarctic ozone reduces drastically, and it was going worse each year. Now, thanks to all the preventive measures that have been taken, Montreal Protocol and so on, preventing the use of chlorofluorocarbons and so on, we have arrested this gradual decline. And indeed, last year, this purple curve is 2019. It was thought that the ozone hole is actually recovering, but this year, this is the yellow curve, it is back on the original curve. It's not getting worse, but it's certainly not improving too. That's the situation on ozone studies in Antarctica. And I have one last video which tells you what are the studies that are going to be undertaken by a team, a research team, in the southern Indian Ocean, including Antarctica. Antarctic expedition this year will probably have other different programs, but this program is also very comprehensive. This program was flagged off in January or February of this year. So here is
Southern Ocean 2020, which aims to understand how human activity has affected the Antarctic Ocean, was flagged off from Mauritius on Saturday. The 2-month-long expedition will be carried on board the South African ocean research vessel S.A. Agulhas by a research team led by Anup Mahajan of the Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology, IITM Pune. The mission's objective is to understand the role and response of the Southern Ocean to the regional and global climate variability. It will investigate air-sea ice interactions and aerosols over the Southern Ocean, also known as the Antarctic Ocean. The vessel will explore waters between India and Antarctica. The expedition has 39 scientists on board and will undertake 18 research projects, including studying the effects of microplastics, the status of cephalopods, marine bacteria, carbon storage in oceans, and heat dynamics in the Southern Ocean. Supplies for food were stocked at Mauritius, and there are chefs on board who will cook for the team. ocean. Previous Indian Southern Ocean missions have yielded key findings, including zones of ventilation for carbon dioxide, polluting airborne particles in the Southern Ocean, and how eddies affect marine ecosystems in warm and highly salty subtropical waters. This mission will collect samples of water and air from 60 stations along the cruise route, which runs along the upper coast of Antarctica, where India's third station, Bharti, is situated. The mission is expected to provide data on how waters in the Southern Ocean and the desolate landscape of Antarctica have been changing due to human-induced climate change and plastic pollution. The research team will quantify these changes and their impact on weather phenomena, such as the monsoons. This is expected to improve understanding of large-scale natural processes and the future climate of India as well as the rest of the world. The expedition is also likely to help better weather forecasts. The key to this is collection of large amounts of data, which will improve our understanding of these systems and put more constraints on climate models. The Southern Ocean Mission was initiated in 2004 by the Ministry of Earth Sciences to understand the impact of climate change on the Southern Ocean. This is the 11th Indian expedition to the Southern Ocean and the largest oceanic expedition from the country. Some of the participating institutes in...
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Amitava. And should we have some time for any question answer?
Well, certainly.
And can I request anybody who wants to put any question, kindly raise your hand, and one by one we can give the time.
Well, first of all, I hope the brief description given by me was interesting to all of you, although it's a very old story.
Yes. It was very interesting. It gives a
very interesting and
it gives quite a good foresight.
Fascinating experience for all of you. But it's good that Government of India supports such programs and such expeditions, and that's wonderful. And but in the long term, I would like to know what are the direct. You have mentioned large number of research that goes on, but the benefits that it must have been an enormous expenditure. And how do you the advantages that you get and the continuity of the project? What is your opinion about it?
Sir, basically, as far as the expenditure is concerned, I think the bulk of the expenditure, I think the lion's share of the expenditure is only chartering the icebreaker vehicles. We unfortunately don't have icebreakers, so we have to charter them. But then I believe even if you have your own ships, they will cost as much whether you use them or not. So it's cheaper to charter the vessels from Norwegians or Swedish or South Africans or whoever will have them, and use it only for the time that you use them. So that having said, the other expenditure on actual experimentation and station construction, etc., is not enormous. You know, all the experiments, and I don't know about other areas, but I can talk about our areas. For instance, the upper atmospheric studies and ozone studies.
So what I meant was the research that you did on meteorology, for example, or ozone layer research.
Yes.
Did it have any impact? I mean, short-term or a long-term impact on the future research or something?
No. All this contributes to the global database of the understanding of this phenomenon, because with recording, I mean, you are probably in a position to understand this situation. Now we are talking about the ozone distribution, the ozone situation over the entire continent of Antarctica, and at your station, what you get is only one location. So unless you supplement this with data taken from several other stations, it doesn't give you the complete picture. So basically, you are part of an international effort to understand the whole phenomenon. So to that extent, I think we are successful. You know, we are successfully a part of an international effort to understand the phenomenon. Yeah. And
well, that's wonderful.
so,
That's wonderful.
and of course in other areas too, we have ionospheric studies, and some of the studies that they are carrying out nowadays, I'm not even updated on those because I've been kind of out of touch with this for some time. I believe nowadays even the ISRO, Indian Space Research Organization, is setting up some of its monitoring and tracking stations in Antarctica for tracking our Navik satellites, you know, the IRNSS satellites. So there are other strategic applications that we are engaged in. And of course, oceanographic studies are of course of great importance, not just for bioresources, but also underwater mineral resources. At the bottom of the sea, there are a lot of minerals which are available for harvesting. You know, so unless you survey them, you can't lay claims on them. So, so to that extent, I think these are very meaningful.
In the beginning, Amitava, in the beginning you said there are 4,000 people who stay in the summer
Yes,
and 1,000 people who stay in the winter.
that's right.
It is only the people from India or from everywhere in the world?
No. We are only about 20 odd people from India in winter, 20 or 30, something like that. The 4,000 is all the countries put together.
Oh,
So in India, Indian summer team is only, in summer is probably 100 people, and nowadays even less.
okay, okay.
Dr. Bhattacharya, was he part of your team? Dr. Bhattacharya?
Dr. Bhatta,
He was part of your team?
no, I never had the good fortune of doing an expedition with Dr. Bhattacharya. I believe he was the leader of the fourth expedition, fourth Indian Antarctic expedition.
Oh, I see.
So where they used the Dakshin Gangotri station and did some initial surveys for the site for the Maitri station. Dr. Bhattacharya was fourth expedition. He was the leader of the fourth expedition.
Sir, yes.
Host sir, please. Yeah, you are muted. You are muted.
No, I am doing it. You have to unmute it yourself also. I am doing it and you also do it. Both sir also do it.
Yeah, please.
Okay, sir, you also do it and I have already done it.
Yes, you are unmuted. Please go ahead.
No,
I can't hear you. Can't hear you.
I am doing it, but Professor is not doing it.
No, he's unmuted, but his a problem.
I have unmuted, but he has also to unmute from his side. From Professor's end, he has to unmute it.
Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Prakash, you have to unmute. We can't hear you.
Yeah, now it's okay. Now it's okay.
Sorry.
Yes, now it is working. Now it is working.
Sir, I don't have any question, but I have to lot of praise for you actually. On both my Amitava and Sushant, and of course Dr. Bhagatak is my teacher, and it was my dream. In fact, when Amitavaji, you once, just wanted to involve us in your summer program. You had a meeting in NPL, some retired person, all the retired scientists had NPL, and you were asking me to just involvement of the teacher. So it was my dream that the this type of a lecture, a popular, really popular science lecture, which would be enjoyed by anybody, irrespective of the subject, physics, chemistry, or biology. So let the corona is over, and we will expect you, and of course, in presence of Sushanto and Amitava and Khatak sir. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm really very delighted.
Sir, for that you have to thank Corona even. Corona has really brought us together and to develop this science that we can do it like this, and perhaps even after the Corona also we can have the same process. Why waste time on traveling? Why go
Yeah,
here
that is
and
true.
there?
It's a great.
My point
And
is
we can do it in the comfort of our house.
no, my point is that in a gathering of suppose 500 teachers, if you just address the teacher immediately, it trickles out. It go to the masses actually. The student will be
That is in the mind. That is, sir, in the mind. When the teachers or anybody is a participant, they accept in the mind that yes, we do it on the web, we do it on the laptop.
But
They accept it.
Sushanto, there is no point in arguing on this thing which is advantage. My
Agree.
point is that really, whether we do in the webinar or whether we do in the masses, really, I mean, it is very helpful. We enjoy it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
My pleasure, sir. My pleasure.
Any other questions, sir? Sir, anybody else? Please raise your hand if there is a question.
Well,
If
nobody else, you have a
if
question.
there is none, then I will take the privilege to put a few words of thanks. All that I could do in the words, not enough for me to put it in words to thank Amitava for such a wonderful presentation. It is just a dream for us to see how people have gone and how people lived and how people developed that scientific persuasion there. And it is a lifetime experience for us, even to see it on the web here, that across us, on the other hand, you are there who has seen it physically. It is a wonderful experience. Thank you very much, and we shall surely look forward for more opportunities and have more thinking about it. Ghatak Sahib's presence has always give us a lot of fillip and
That
support,
was really a wonderful lecture.
and it is wonderful to have sir with us and see around all the other senior scientists, everybody. That is a lot of encouragement for us to organize this program. We really look forward for your support. Thank you very much. Thank you again, Amitava. And before
Thank you for all.
before I conclude it, I have a small token of remembrance for you. I will send it by courier. A small book. You have been to Antarctica. When you come back to India, you learn perhaps in our ancient times, we used to consider Colombo as a part of India. And I have a book for you, Colombo to Almora, written by Swami Vivekananda. And I believe when you explore the entire south of the sea, you come to India and see the exploration of India in another context. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amitava.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for this.
Special thanks to Sushanto.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. My privilege. Look forward for more opportunities. And thank you, Niloy, for
Thank you.
taking so much of
Thank
trouble
you.
to be sitting in a car and
Hey, it's
firstly
pretty nice.
getting up so early. I was wondering whether
looking at
you're.
the sea. It's raining. The waves are not as big as Amitava showed, but it's okay.
Okay, you were much near to the Arctic region. That was good.
Great. Well, I let me also take the opportunity of thanking Babluda and Shereen Murthy. Thank you very much for attending this. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
All your family also, Amitava, please extend our thanks to them
Sure,
for have kindly joined,
sure. Thank
especially your wife, because without her, we were not starting it.
you. He just came back from work. And
So I was afraid if she is not allowed in, then Amitava won't start.
yeah, perhaps. Okay, great.
Okay, sir.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. Sir, কেমন আপনার day was very busy today? Prakash sir,
Uh,
your
I-
day was very busy today.
yes, I was very busy today. I had to be in a temple.
I don't know. Today was a bad day. In fact, 26/11 itself was a bad day. And then today, this Rothin has gone for a Shraddha
I know it.
function.
I know it.
You had gone for a Shraddha function.
Yes.
Our friend, that Mojumdar, Indrajit Mojumdar, had gone for a Shraddha function.
Acha, what happened? To him?
Another our friend at Bangalore, he had gone to the hospital for his checkup. He had a stent fitted recently, so he had to go to the hospital for a detailed checkup. The day was little bad. Anyway, Amitava,
But you made it somewhat different actually. When we are attending the meeting, we are diverted. We are
Yes.
just away from-
yes,
You made it somewhat different.
yes,
Thank you.
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You can close it, no?
Okay.
Okay.
Shall I close the room, Tom?
Yes.
Thank you.